The first time I saw it, my heart dropped. There it was. A tall, sturdy fence, freshly painted, stretching across the far side of my backyard. Blocking everything. Blocking the horizon. Blocking the sunsets. I sat on my usual rocking chair, my hands gripping the wooden armrests, staring at the massive barrier my own son, Elijah, had built. The sun was halfway down, burning orange and crimson, but I couldn't see it. Not anymore. The fence swallowed the view like a wall between us, a silent statement. And somehow in that instant, I knew this wasn't about the sunset. This was about him. About us. "Mom, it's just a fence," he said from the porch, his voice casual, too casual, like he didn't realize what he'd done. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just a fence," I echoed. "You know how much this view means to me, Elijah. It's more than a fence. It's everything I've had left of your father." He shrugged, not looking me in the eye. "Times change, Mom. We need privacy. And maybe it's time for boundaries." Boundaries. I bit the inside of my cheek. That word felt sharp, foreign. A knife. A week ago, things had been different. Not perfect. Our relationship had its ups and downs, sure, but nothing like this. Elijah had always been independent, strong-willed, maybe a little stubborn, but I never thought he'd take something so literal and emotional as my sunsets away. We used to watch the sun dip below the Savannah skyline every evening. I'd sit in my rocking chair, a cup of tea in hand, and he'd join me sometimes after work. We didn't talk much, but the silence was comfortable. The silence said love. Said trust. Said family. Now, even that silence felt heavy, toxic, like it had turned against me. I remembered the day he started distancing himself. Small things, late-night texts instead of calls, dinner excuses, brushing off questions about his life. I chalked it up to adulthood, growing pains. But the fence, the actual physical fence, was a message. A blockade. A declaration. Weeks before the fence, subtle signs had been popping up. Elijah had started closing doors, literally and metaphorically. I noticed my questions being dodged. He argued about privacy and space more often than ever. There were little financial secrets I stumbled upon accidentally, unexplained expenses, new subscriptions, odd withdrawals. I hadn't wanted to believe he was keeping things from me. Not my son. Not the boy who used to run into my arms crying when life hurt him. But life has a way of pushing us toward truths we're not ready to accept. And that fence was the first undeniable proof that things had changed, permanently. I rocked back in my chair, staring at the wooden paint, listening to the distant hum of traffic. My mind raced. Anger. Sadness. Confusion. A strange sense of betrayal. How could the boy I raised, the boy who once held my hand walking home from school, become someone who built walls, both literal and emotional, to keep me out? Tears welled up, but I blinked them back. I couldn't let him see me cry. Not yet. I had to understand why. Had I failed him as a mother? Had I been too protective, too critical, too something? Or had he simply changed into someone I didn't recognize? The sun sank lower. Its last golden rays barely peeked over the top of the fence. I realized with a heavy sinking in my chest that this sunset, my sanctuary, was gone. And with it, perhaps, the relationship I thought I had with my son. I didn't know it yet, but the fence was just the beginning. Behind those planks were secrets, lies, and betrayals that would shake our family to its core. What I thought was just a wall for privacy was actually a wall to hide the truth. And when I finally discovered it, I would realize that Elijah's distance wasn't just teenage stubbornness. It was something much darker, something I couldn't have imagined. I sat there long after the sun disappeared, letting the darkness wrap around me. The next chapter of our lives, the one filled with confrontation, heartbreak, and shocking revelations, was about to begin. The morning after I first saw the fence, I woke up before dawn. I couldn't sleep. My heart was still heavy, thudding against my ribs like a warning drum. I stepped onto the porch and squinted at the horizon. The fence was worse in daylight. Its clean lines, sharp angles, and polished paint mocked me. It wasn't just blocking the sun. It was blocking me. Blocking everything my husband had left me. our memories, our quiet moments, our peace. I rubbed my temples and whispered to the empty yard. Why, Elijah? Why? It started small. A receipt slipped under my door. A charge I didn't recognize. Something about a landscaping company. My first thought was, maybe it's nothing. Maybe he hired someone to fix the yard. But the amount, it was more than anyone needed for grass. Curiosity turned to suspicion. I began checking his accounts, his phone, cautiously, secretly. I'm not proud, but the unease in my gut demanded it. Then I found it. A hidden payment to a construction company. Another to a design consultant. And then, a series of odd transfers to an offshore account. My son, my own son, was hiding things from me. I sank into the rocking chair, staring at my hands. The blood left my face. My mind raced. What else was he keeping from me? I tried to approach him carefully that evening. Elijah, can we talk? I said, standing in the kitchen doorway. He barely looked up from his phone. About what? About the fence. About everything. He gave me that look, a mix of annoyance and arrogance that used to make my stomach twist. Mom, I told you. It's just privacy. That's all. I swallowed hard. Privacy doesn't need to cost me the sun. Or the truth. I think you're hiding something. He froze. For a second, the confident mask slipped. His jaw tightened. And then he smiled. Not a warm smile. A smirk. You think I'd tell you everything, he said. Mom, you're cute when you try. Something inside me snapped. That smugness. That dismissiveness. He had crossed a line. Over the next week, I dug deeper. I quietly monitored bills, bank statements, and emails. And then I found the truth. Elijah wasn't just building a fence. He was siphoning money. Hidden accounts. Secret transfers. Investments I had no knowledge of. And he wasn't doing it for college, or rent, or anything practical. He was buying things, luxury things, trips with friends, gadgets I hadn't even heard of. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, betrayal, disbelief. How could he do this to me? To the woman who had worked double shifts to send him to private school? To the woman who had stayed up nights nursing him when he was sick? I clenched my fists until my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to shake him and demand answers. But I didn't. Not yet. Then, I discovered something worse. One night, I stayed up and checked his computer while he was out. I found emails, exchanges between him and someone I didn't know. Someone professional. A lawyer, maybe. No, worse. Someone who had been helping him set up the accounts, hiding the money, keeping it out of my reach. The realization hit me like a blow. This wasn't teenage rebellion. This was calculated, planned, betrayal with a strategy. And suddenly, the fence made sense. The barrier wasn't just for privacy. It was a symbol, a warning. He was building walls around himself, and between us, before I could catch on, I spent nights pacing, rocking, crying silently. I felt isolated, confused, afraid. Afraid that I'd raised a son I no longer knew. Afraid that I had failed him, or that he had failed me. Family dinners became silent battles. My husband, long gone, had left me only with memories and warnings in his letters. Trust your instincts, he had written years ago. I clung to that line like a lifeline now. I couldn't confront Elijah without proof. Words weren't enough anymore. I needed facts, evidence, something concrete to show him that I wasn't just a paranoid mother, that he couldn't hide behind smirks or half-truths. And then I found it. Hidden in a folder on his laptop, a plan, detailed and documented. Expenses, transfers, a timeline of deceit. He had been moving money for over a year. And not just his own. He had been taking small amounts from my account when I wasn't looking, disguising them as shared household expenses. My breath caught. Every instinct, every warning, every little feeling I'd ignored over the months screamed at me. He had been lying to me from the beginning. The fence. The smirk. The evasions. It all made sense. And in that moment, I realized the battle wasn't just about money. It was about control. My son was trying to take control of my life, and he had started winning. The days after discovering Elijah's hidden accounts were a blur. I walked through my house like a ghost, seeing everything in shades of betrayal. The fence loomed outside like a constant reminder of what he had taken from me. Not just money, not just my trust, but my sense of safety, my peace, my home. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every time I sat on the porch, I imagined him smirking behind the fence, daring me to confront him. And I realized something terrifying. I couldn't confront him yet. Not without a plan. Not without power. I spent hours staring at old photos of us. Elijah as a baby, laughing in the yard, holding my hand, trusting me implicitly. I remembered the soft sound of his voice calling Mom in the middle of the night, the way he would curl up on the couch during storms. That boy was gone, replaced by someone calculating, someone cold. I felt a strange cocktail of grief and fury. Grief for what we had lost. Fury at the deception, at the betrayal, at the audacity. And buried beneath both, a spark of determination. I realized I had two choices, crumble under the weight of his lies, or fight. I started quietly. Small moves. I reviewed his bank statements meticulously, tracked patterns, and noted inconsistencies. I opened a secure email account, kept a journal of all transactions, and made photocopies of evidence. Every late-night withdrawal, every unexplained transfer, every suspicious purchase went into my secret folder. I wasn't just documenting. I was preparing. Preparing to level the playing field. Preparing to remind my son, my own blood, that I was not powerless. Planning revenge was exhausting. I cried at night, feeling both righteous and broken. How had we gotten here? I loved him. I raised him. I had done everything right, or so I thought. And yet here I was, plotting to expose him, to teach him a lesson, to reclaim control over my life. The house felt empty, even when he was there. Every interaction was charged with tension. Every word he spoke, every glance, every casual remark about boundaries, cut deep. I realized he was testing me, and I needed to be smarter than him. I reached out to a few close friends I trusted. My neighbor, Mrs. Larkin, had always been like an aunt, quietly observant, wise. I shared pieces of the story, enough to gain perspective, but not enough to expose my plan. You have to protect yourself, she said firmly. Evidence is your power. Don't confront him without it. And be ready, he's cunning, but so are you. Her words stuck with me. I realized revenge wasn't about anger. It was about strategy, precision, timing. And I needed both. I mapped everything out. Step 1. Gather undeniable proof of all financial misconduct. Check. Step 2. Secure independent advice from a lawyer who understood family law. Check. Step 3. Create a controlled environment for confrontation, not a screaming match, but undeniable clarity. Check. And step 4. The hardest. Maintain patience. Bide my time until I could execute the plan flawlessly. Patience had never been my strongest suit, but anger alone was useless. As I pieced together the evidence, I noticed anomalies. Certain accounts weren't just for personal use. Some payments were linked to third parties, mysterious figures who seemed invested in his secrecy. Who were they? And what had he promised them? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. This was bigger than I imagined. The fence, the hidden accounts, the lies. It was all part of a larger picture. And I was only beginning to see it. I also realized I wasn't alone in my fight. There were clues that others in our community had noticed his behavior too. Small comments, subtle observations, hushed warnings, all pieces of a puzzle I was determined to solve. Every night, I faced myself in the mirror. Rage mixed with sorrow. Love mixed with fear. Anger mixed with doubt. Could I forgive him someday? Could we rebuild? Or was this the point of no return? I realized revenge wasn't about cruelty. It was about justice, clarity, and reclaiming my life. And I knew I couldn't hesitate. Hesitation would allow him to tighten his grip, build more walls, and possibly disappear with my hard-earned resources. The sun set behind the fence every evening now, a silent mockery, a symbol of everything I'd lost and everything I needed to regain. I closed my eyes and made a vow. He would not win. Not this time. I started setting subtle traps. Small tests to see if he would slip, reveal more of his deception, or underestimate me. Every interaction became a chess move. I recorded conversations secretly, documented every evasive answer, and slowly, methodically, tightened the net around him. This wasn't a story about shouting or confrontation. This was a story about patience, strategy, and a mother reclaiming power she thought she had lost. And deep down, I knew the biggest shock, the revelation that would change everything, was still ahead. I woke up the morning I would act with a clear head. The fog of betrayal had thinned. My plan felt sharp and possible. I laid out everything on the kitchen table. Bank printouts, screenshots, a folder with the construction receipts, the emails I'd found, the list of names tied to the offshore transfers. I spread them like cards. This was not about drama. This was about proof. About muscle. About a grown child learning there are consequences. First call was to my lawyer. Angela, I said, I need to freeze anything he might use to hurt me. I need somebody to look at concealment and fraud. And I want to explore property protections. She did not ask many questions. She said what a good lawyer says. We'll move carefully, she said. We'll put holds, issue subpoenas. Don't confront him yet. Let us work. Good. That's what I wanted. Next, I went to the bank. I sat with the manager and opened the folder. I laid it out like an accusation. He frowned. He called the fraud department. They called Angela back. The bank placed temporary flags. They asked if I wanted to file an official claim. I did. I wanted them watching. I wanted the transfers traced. I wanted names. While the banks worked, I kept digging. I found invoices to a small landscaping and build firm outside Savannah. It matched the contractor who'd put up the fence. I found contracts. Names. Email threads between Elijah and someone named Mark Ellis. Mark Ellis had the kind of address you expect for someone who deals with developers. A large company. A number. A website that promised privacy builds, bespoke fencing, and boundary solutions for wealthy clients. The deep, ugly thought slid in. Was the fence just a fence? Or was it part of something bigger? I needed allies. Not many people I trusted. But I had neighbors who loved that sunset like I did. I had Mrs. Larkin who kept a list of birds and a hot casserole for everyone. I had Pastor Jean who ran the community garden and owed me favors for years. I called a few. I told them, in pieces, what I suspected. The words came out cleaner than I thought they would. My son is hiding money. He built a fence. I think developers are involved. I could use witnesses. I could use voices. They showed up. Quietly. With notes. With stories. With things they'd noticed. Unfamiliar trucks at night. Men photographing the far lot. A drone the week before. People who had come to the neighborhood asking about property views. That was the moment I realized I hadn't just been betrayed by my son. There was a small machine working around him. Or maybe he was the machine's puppet. Either way, we now had witnesses. CTA, if this feels familiar, if someone you loved betrayed you and you needed others to see the truth, hit like and subscribe. This next move might inspire someone out there. I chose a public place. Neutral ground. The cafe on the corner where the barista knows me by name. I asked Elijah to meet. He said yes, the way people say yes when they think they can charm trouble away. He arrived in a polo, clean, confident. He kissed my cheek the way he always had. Too quick. Too casual. Mom, he said, what is this about? The fence looked great. I thought you'd like it once it was done. Privacy, you know. I slid a printout across the table quietly. Not loud. Nervous people say too much. I didn't want that. This is what your contractor billed, I said. This is who he wrote to. This is where the money came from. Who is Mark Ellis? He didn't answer at first. The smile dropped. The skin around his mouth tightened. It's just business, he said finally. It's nothing you need to worry about. I pushed. I kept my voice level. Is it nothing to you to take money out of our joint card? To hide transfers? To set up accounts in names I don't know? To block my view with a fence I didn't agree to? He looked like a cornered animal. Then he did something I didn't expect. He laughed. Soft. Then sharp. Mom, he said, you're dramatic. That laugh. That dismissal. That was all I needed. I stood up, walked out of the cafe, and left the folder on the table. The waitstaff found it and called him. He came after me into the street, voice high. You left it, Ma. You left your proof. I turned slowly and said, very calm, I left it because the world needs to see it. And because you won't stop hiding. Not from me. Not from the law. People on the street had started to stare. I felt the air change. The power of shame is small but sharp. The seed was planted. What I didn't yet know was how deep it went. Angela's subpoena did something I hadn't expected. It called Mark Ellis's company records. The company used a shell to buy easement rights in a nearby block. The fence wasn't just for privacy. It was to secure a line of sight for a future condo project. The fence blocked my sunset, but protected a developer's view corridor. Elijah had been paid as a middleman. He'd accepted checks, smallish payments at first, then bigger ones. The offshore accounts held the remainder. Why would he do it? Money, obviously. But also promises. Promises of a cut in future profits. A job. An escape from the town. Things that sound small until the price becomes everything you own. That revelation hit hard. He'd sold the view that had comforted his dying father. He'd sold our family memory. To strangers who promised him a future. That scream stayed in me for hours. Then came the call I feared. Mark Ellis's company had a lawyer. And that lawyer called Angela. They threatened, legally sharp. They hinted at non-disclosure agreements. They said, think of your reputation, Mrs. Lane. They hinted at lawsuits. We were not scared. We were prepared. Angela had a response. The paper trail. The witness statements. The bank holds. The email threads where Elijah thanked Mark. Where Mark promised a discreet arrangement. Where the company discussed eliminating view obstruction. It began to look ugly. And public. I leaked another piece to the local paper, not for scandal, but for protection. Once the paper asked questions, the town paid attention. Then the county zoning board took notice. Then the developer began to slow. People who had been quiet started calling their council members. People came by the porch to sit and watch the fence. My sunset had become a small civic fight. My son was at the center of it. We kept pushing on the finances. Angela filed motions and worked with a forensic accountant. It wasn't fast. It wasn't clean. It took subpoenas, international cooperation, and patience. But it worked. They traced transfers to a small trust overseas. The trust's beneficiary? Not Mark Ellis. Not Elijah. Someone else's name kept popping up. A name I recognized from 100 neighborhood barbecues. A name I trusted. My cousin, Paul. I sat with that for a long time. Paul, who'd once helped me build that porch swing. Paul, who often visited on Sundays. Paul, who knew how much the sunset meant.
Why?
Why would Paul be involved? I confronted him in the church parking lot. He prayed, then he lied. He said he was only a pass-through. He said the company offered good money and that he needed to help his own family. He begged. He cried. He asked for forgiveness. That was twist 3. My betrayal had branches. My son hadn't acted alone. He had friends, family, partners. People who should have protected me instead profited. Everything I'd been building came together in court filings, in council hearings, in community outrage. The developer's plan was delayed due to the scrutiny. The company's stock went down after the story reached business press. The banks froze the accounts. People stopped buying. In the middle of it all, Elijah stood small. The confident smirk was gone. He stared at me in hearings and meetings and didn't say much. His voice cracked once, on a call where he tried to apologize. "I thought it would be fine," he said. "I thought I could fix it later." You can't fix trust. Not like that. One night, he came to the porch. No fence between us then because the county had ordered a temporary review that halted the final painting of the panels. The sunset spilled over the incomplete wood. He sat 2 chairs away from me. We did not speak for a long time. Finally he said, "Mom, I messed up." You think it would ease. But my anger had softened into something else. I had done this not to wreck him but to wake him. The legal actions, the exposure, the shame, those were all part of teaching him there are lines you don't cross. He reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. I just took it and held it like cold metal. The developer backed off. Mark Ellis's firm provided documents and a few executives resigned. Paul apologized publicly and volunteered at the community garden for months. My son lost potential future contracts. He had to work for what he wanted, with clear eyes. I won't pretend it was easy. It cost me time, sleep, and a lot of emotional labor. It cost him shame and a hard path to repair. But I had my sunsets back on most nights. Not every night. Not instantly. But the view returned sometimes. And when it did, it felt earned. CTA, if you're still with me, hit that like button. Share this story. If you or someone you love is building walls instead of bridges, maybe it's time to act before it's too late. My revenge was surgical. It was legal. It aimed to restore balance. I wanted my son to see consequences before he lost himself to easy money and stranger promises. I wanted my neighborhood to protect what mattered. I wanted my husband's memory honored. I never wanted to break him. I wanted him to learn. The community rallied. Old friends came forward. My lawyer did what lawyers do. Banks did what banks do. And slowly, the house grew calm again. The fence stands now, patched and shorter than before. There are gaps where the light sneaks through. Sometimes I sit and watch the sun slip beneath the horizon and feel it warm my face. It's not the same as before. Nothing is. But there is peace and there is a lesson learned. The house felt quieter after the storm passed. Not silent, exactly. The wind still whispered through the trees, the sun spilled warm gold across the porch, and the birds returned. But the tension that had been heavy, suffocating, had lifted. Slowly. I looked at Elijah. He was different now. Smaller in some ways, humbler in others. The arrogance had melted, replaced by something raw and awkward. He apologized again, softly this time, no smirk, no defensiveness. Just a boy who had grown too fast, made mistakes, and finally saw the cost. I let him speak. I let him explain. Not everything. Not all the lies. But enough that I could see he understood the weight of his actions. Rebuilding trust isn't instant. It never is. I still see the fence when I wake up, when I pour my morning coffee, when I sit with a friend on the porch. And sometimes I feel the old pangs of betrayal. But now, they're tempered with understanding. People can break, but they can also learn. They can grow. Elijah has to prove himself every day. He has to make choices that match the values I raised him with. And I watch, cautiously hopeful. I've learned that boundaries are essential, and silence isn't always submission. Sometimes, it's power. The neighborhood came together in ways I hadn't imagined. People checked on each other's yards, kept their eyes open for shady contractors, and valued the simple things, sunsets, porches, and trust. My story, shared quietly at first, became a cautionary tale about honesty, boundaries, and respect, not just in families but in communities. Mrs. Larkin and Pastor Jean were right. Sometimes it takes a small spark to light a bigger fire. I didn't just fight for my sunset. I fought for the principle that deceit and greed can't quietly take root without consequences. Revenge isn't about cruelty. It's about justice. About making the people you love and care for see the truth of their actions. About restoring balance. I could have screamed, yelled, or broken things in anger. But I didn't. I chose patience, evidence, strategy. And in doing so, I preserved my own dignity. I also gave Elijah the chance to see the consequences, to learn, and to grow. It wasn't easy. It cost sleepless nights, emotional exhaustion, and fear. But in the end, it worked. I learned that love doesn't mean blind trust. That silence can be strategic. That watching a sunset can be a metaphor for life, sometimes blocked, sometimes bright, always moving forward. I learned to rely on allies, to document, to be patient. And most importantly, I learned that even when someone betrays you, you have the power to reclaim your life and your peace. Thanks for staying with me through this. Life can be messy, betrayal can hurt deeply, and sometimes, the people we love most disappoint us. But remember, you have the power to protect yourself, seek justice, and reclaim your space, literally and metaphorically. If this story hit home, like this video, subscribe for more stories that explore raw family drama, shocking betrayals, and lessons in empowerment. Comment below, have you ever faced someone who built walls instead of bridges? What did you do? I want to hear your story.